So even though I can record it, I won't be able to submit it. I am in
Right.
another group in my iLearn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've got it recording now, and as soon as it's done, I will post the link into the discussion board.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're the man, Scott.
I know. Don't you guys forget it. Just kidding.
Okay. So the first part of the agenda says begin with a quick synopsis of the case. How do you guys do with a study case for this week?
It was interesting. I don't know. I kind of felt like it was set up different than the cases in the past, where you had a manager or some kind of leader of something who had a very specific problem they were trying to figure out. And this one didn't seem like there was a specific problem it was looking at. It was kind of just hey, here's a big event that happened, kind of. And I don't know. I kind of just focused on what went wrong in general, I guess. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I agree with that. I like that it wasn't just like a business. I thought reading about NASA stuff was really interesting. Kept my attention a little bit better. I thought it was interesting that it was also an after the fact. It wasn't a here's our situation. What should we do now? It's like, this is what happened. What could we have done to avoid it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of confused at the beginning because I didn't understand what we're supposed to do, because pretty much all of the things that happened were because they didn't pay attention to little details until the big accident came. So I was thinking, what are I supposed to do with business here? But then I understood when I was reading the reading assignment that there are some events that we could avoid sorry, if we pay attention early. And as we read in the study case, also it would be cheaper for them to pay attention before. So now they had to do all these changes, and it costs a lot of money.
For sure.
Okay, it says select the discussion questions you feel will best help your group to learn the most from this case. So what do you guys think was the issue?
I was able to identify a couple of like large standing issue or large issues, mostly organizational wise. Like for instance, one of the big ones that I saw was the two like groups. The MAT? Oh, what was it called? MMT and the DAT. Yeah, it was funny because they were like contrasting with how much organization they had. Because the DAT, it said, didn't have like a clear outline of what they were actually supposed to do and who they were supposed to report to and the real protocols. And then on the other hand, the MMT was very strict and very regulated and that kind of thing. So it was just interesting to see the inconsistency between organizations, both working on the same project, and then just seeing how the DAT had few regulations but kind of overstepped their bounds, like how they were asking for images and incorrectly and stuff like that. Whereas the MMT had a ton of regulations, but they weren't following them. Like they were supposed to meet every day, but only met 5 times, that kind of thing. Just seeing how they were not really, didn't have clear expectations and then weren't living up to them either.
I thought it was interesting how they described like certain events that would happen in a launch or in a landing would kind of get changed. Their classifications of problems, like a problem type would get changed. If that makes sense. You know how sometimes it was a big issue, and then if it didn't happen like 3 or 4 times in a row, then they'd lower how big of an issue that kind of was. And I don't know. I just thought that was kind of just going right along the lines with the inconsistencies we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like the more they got away with, the more they would like not worry about it in the future. Like, oh, we got away with this 5 times before, so why worry about it now?
Okay. So why is it important to understand these issues?
Because people died.
Yeah, definitely. Well, as you guys said, sometimes things don't go wrong, even though we know that, maybe those little things are going to cause a problem later. And that happens in our lives as well. So we don't pay too much attention to that until it become a big problem. So they didn't care at the beginning, but now they had to, invest in fixing those problems. They could have avoid this accident if they were aware of the situation before. Same thing in our lives.
Yeah, I think kind of along the lines with the inconsistencies again is because they treated every situation differently. They didn't. I don't know. I kind of got the feeling they didn't really know how to act when something did go wrong. It's because they didn't really have a set plan in place to be able to handle that. It was what do we do now? Not what do we do now, but it's like for getting those images. I mean, if they would have had kind of the protocol in place before that and followed it, they would have known exactly what they needed to do. They probably would have been able to kind of, I don't know, not avoid the situation, but they would have known how to react. They didn't seem like they were very prepared to react to an emergency situation.
I felt as though I was surprised at like how poor communication there was between all the groups. I was like, they're all under NASA, but they all have their, subgroups. And it's like, I can't remember whether it was the DAT or the MMT or who was what. But I remember one of the groups, the ones that wanted the pictures, that never got them because they couldn't get through the chain of authority to get them or whatever. Thought it seemed to be a big issue, or at least bigger than the rest of everyone else, that they should check into the foam debris falling off. Yeah, everyone else was like, it's happened before. We're not worried about it. Thanks for your analysis, but we're going ahead anyways. And it was like, I don't know. I was just surprised at why would they have these groups if they weren't going to listen to them? Like, where's I don't know. I just thought that just kind of surprised me when I was reading it. So what's the point if you already have your preconceived opinion to hire this crew to tell you whether there's a danger or not from the foam debris break off,
Yeah, that was actually a pretty consistent theme that I could see in a lot of the problems they had. Like the one part where it talked about the Challenger that exploded just a few seconds after takeoff because of an O-ring, and how it explained the engineer the night before said, "Hey, I don't think this is going to work." And they were just like, no, it's okay. And the same thing, like, as soon as people started warning him, like you were saying, Alex, just as soon as people started warning him about the possible repercussions of the foam, they were like, nah, we can't do anything about it, whatever, it's no big deal, They just don't listen to the experts.
I felt as though they were more concerned with meeting deadlines, with keeping up with schedule without having to, use extra resources they hadn't planned for, than they were about the people. They were just like increasing the risk for everyone on board just to meet deadlines. Like, yeah, whatever, we'll take your life in our hands because we don't want to deal with this. I mean, I'm sure that's not his exact thought process, but I felt like when he was weighing out all the options, he obviously didn't weigh, the repercussion of potentially the crew dying upon the Columbia too high. Otherwise, he would have done something about it. I felt like that should be top priority, and if there were any question marks or variables, he should have looked into them. But it didn't seem like that was their top priority. They're like, listen, we've got schedules to get to, deadlines to meet. We're already been cut from funding in the past. We don't want to miss deadlines and have our people get upset with us and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, another thing that I found is that they had to save. Well, how you say that? They had a short budget, so they didn't invest more money in the camera lenses and other things that were, prevention equipment. So I don't know. I was kind of. Is the NASA? They're supposed to have a lot of money to invest in security.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've been saying, they just don't focus on the safety of the people. They're focused more on bureaucratic stuff. Whereas this kind of an organization needs to be focused more on keeping those people safe. And they're just not spending them, or they don't have the money in the first place, and they're not spending it on safety things.
Yeah. Okay, there is a question. It says, what was the recovery window in this case? So the recovery window is the time period between a threat and a major accident or prevented accident in which collective action is possible.
I'd say from the time the phone broke off and they realized that it had happened until, the scheduled time to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, that was their, I forget what the term you just used, but that was their, I guess, time frame.
Yeah, recovery window.
Yeah. And I feel like they could have expanded their recovery window if they thought there was an issue. They could have been like, hey, guys, we're going to need you to stay up there for a few more days till we fully assess the situation and make sure you're safe to re-enter Earth's orbit or atmosphere.
So yeah, looking at specific dates there, their launch day. So that foam struck the wing on launch day. So basically day one, July 16th, 2003. And then I guess your time to do anything about it was what? Yeah, the Columbia broke apart on February 1st. So you probably want to go do something about it before that. So day 11 or something.
Yeah, and when the group started to find out what the problem was, they said they were going to take like a few days, 5 days, I guess, or 7 days, and they took like 5 months to find out that the phone strike was a problem, why it exploded.
I think they knew. I think they were trying to cover their tails.
Yeah.
One of the things that it did discuss in there I thought was kind of interesting was how there were other problems that they deemed were more important. I mean, we're seeing this as an after the fact and, oh, this was the problem. We should have taken care of it before. But I just wonder what kind of issues had come up during the flight that they could have deemed more important to the safety and survival of the crew as to devote their time to those issues and not to this one. It doesn't give us any explanation there, but there were possibly some other things that went wrong that they thought were more important to focus their time and energy on.
Yeah. Okay. It says, what is human cognitive biases and how does it apply in this case? So cognitive biases, systematic errors in judgment.
Cognitive.
Cognitive. Yeah, thanks.
You're good.
Biases. So it says that it's a systematic errors in judgment. Confirmation bias, our tendency to look for information that confirms our existing views. Sunk cost bias, our tendency to escalate commitment to a course of action into which we have already invested time, money, or other resources. So it says, what is human cognitive biases and how does it apply in this case?
I think that the heads at NASA didn't want anything to be wrong. So when they looked at the data that was sent their way, when they heard people's, concerns, they listened to them with a bias, saying, we don't want anything to be wrong. So I'm going to dull down everything you're saying so that it doesn't seem like anything is wrong. I feel like that's just the way we are as humans. We see things the way we want to see them oftentimes. Just because it's easier to look at things with your preconceived notions than to have to change. More convenient that way.
Yeah, it's like, so my mother-in-law is kind of this crazy woman who believes all kinds of crazy things. And when it comes to evolution, we just don't talk about it around her because she just absolutely believes that it's the worst thing ever. It's not true, and it's total, and not to say that it is or isn't, but just she finds all this evidence and all these studies to say, to prove that her point of view is right. But there are there's ample evidence on both sides that it's both right and wrong. So, the kinds of studies that people do, you can always find there's some kind of a bias. It's like the studies that are done that are funded by people who have something to gain from it, you can't trust them because they have a bias.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree so much with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it says, what evidence is present in this case of some of these biases? I think we already talked about this. It says, what is short cognitive framing? It says, frameworks, beliefs, and assumptions that help us simplify a complicated reality. So as you guys said, the NASA were paying more attention to have to keep on a schedule instead of putting more attention to the people and to the risk and all these experts that were telling, hey, these things are not gonna work fine. So let's fix it before. So they just wanted to have fulfill their program, and yeah, that was it.
Well said.
It says, when did the problems with Colombia begin? When did the problems begin?
in the development stages.
Yeah, long before takeoff.
I was gonna say, didn't they have some issues on the first flight of Columbia?
Yeah, I think so. They had some little things that they just, like I was talking about the tiles that they had to replace. They just
Yeah, like-
replaced like 300 tiles or something like I can't remember.
Yeah.
So how would you characterize the culture of at NASA, strengths and weaknesses? So what do you guys think are the strengths of the NASA and the weaknesses?
They're pretty good at building. I'd say they're pretty good at building their ships.
The funny thing is, I don't even
That's their strength.
I don't even think NASA built their ships. Didn't Boeing and Lockheed Martin build their ships?
Yeah, they just got them into space. They're good at getting objects to space.
They're very mission driven. I mean, that's a good quality to have as long as you can take care of the other things. But they're like very, very stick to the budget, stick to the mission, stick to the deadline, get things done type of an attitude. But unfortunately, one of their weaknesses is they neglected safety and other protocols in the way.
Yeah, kind of right along that line. Obviously, setting a weakness. Reading here, it says that most of the time, kind of you're in a situation where everybody just wants you to prove that there's something that's right. Prove to me that it's right. It says here at NASA, the culture was more of a prove to me that there's something wrong. And to me, that kind of just builds a culture of, hey, we're going to do the least amount as possible just to get by. And so unless you can prove to me that there's something really wrong, we're going to let it be. So I think that's a big problem, I think.
Definitely.
I think another weakness they had is that they didn't follow the protocols. For example, they had to check the how do you say, the spaceship, and they had to do it certain day, and they were doing it, before, and they had to do it. They did it in the landed test. So
yeah, I think what you're talking about is they were, instead of doing like real in-flight testing, they were doing it on the ground.
yeah, that's thank you, man.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing I thought it was. Okay, let's see. Says, tell me about the people in the case that were important contributors to the mission's failure. Contributors.
We lost Alex.
I don't know.
So I think some of the people that were key contributors. Well, I don't know if it named anybody specific, because there were people that were contributors or people that warned against the problem. Like, I can't remember the name. The lady from, or the person, I can't remember who, from DAT that warned about the problem beforehand, or like sent the email, or didn't send the email to the engineering team saying, hey, this is a problem and it should be.
He didn't send it, but he showed some of his coworkers or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah.
I remember reading that. I cannot remember who it was though.
Is it Roger Boishley or something like that?
Well, I think he was from one of the previous. He was the one who found the O-ring stuff.
Oh yeah,
the
that's right.
Challenger. Who was that?
Okay, but we know who we're talking about. All right, the next question says, what is the concept of team design? It says conditions that, when present, increase the probability of team effectiveness. So do you guys think they had a team design?
Let's see if they did. They didn't really execute it very well.
Yeah, I think they had a lot of teams, a lot of
Right.
different groups that were supposed to work together, but it wasn't a very effective team design, I don't think. I mean, they had problems communicating. They weren't going through the right channels to do certain things. And then even if things were done correctly, people did not listen in ways that they were supposed to, if you ask me.
Definitely. So we have a question that says, do you think they have a psychological safety, which means team design that affects team behavior and performance, concept of risk taking, team unity. So do they have psychological safety?
It really seems like they were pretty disconnected. Like their culture wasn't so much about communicating things, like we were talking earlier. They weren't too worried about getting problems solved and communicating the problems between each other. They were more focused on just kind of doing what was only within their little scope, kind of just getting the job done and not really worrying about other people.
Anybody else? I think they had psychological safety. I mean, they all knew what they were going to do, so they knew the risk. And for sure, they had some practices before they went to space. But the problem was the communication connections. So I guess they had this psychological safety, but when the time came when they had to, to communicate with the base, they couldn't. All right. It says any personal experiences that could be applied to this study case.
Well, I don't think any of us have ever been on a rocket to space. I mean, I guess for me personally, I work in a situation where the main office is for my banker in North Dakota. And it seems like, I don't know, just kind of citing the communication aspects, the failures of communication we see in this case study, kind of apply to that, where you have a bunch of different situations that are very specific in nature to Arizona that they don't quite understand there, and trying to communicate those things and getting the messages to the right people and having the people that can actually do something about those problems. It seems like that communication's not there. If it is there, people don't listen. So I guess that's kind of a broad way to apply this, is just how important it is for businesses and for people to be able to communicate effectively to avoid big problems and disasters. Just making sure you have the right systems in place and the right kind of procedures and protocols to follow. Those are things that you can do, you can put into place to make sure that that's happening. But if it's not there, it can lead to potential disasters like we saw in the Columbia incident.
Yeah, I agree. It's just important to. It's also important. I mean, to just make sure that everyone knows what those are. You know, make sure that everyone knows their role and knows who to talk to, and then make it possible. And then when the communication does come through, pay attention to it and treat it as a real communication. Don't just discount it because you've gotten away with it a few times before.
Yeah. I think you're right, because in the case, I think it said multiple people had no idea how to request those images from the Department of Defense. So people kind of just went off willy-nilly and did whatever they could. And obviously, nothing happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you guys said, communication is one of the main things in any job, in any situation, actually, even in our families. So I think many things can be prevented if we have a good communication. Okay. Says, so it says share with the group how things turn out. And there is a video. Do you guys watch the video?
No.
I was watching it earlier in the day, during the day, and it's so what we watch in the video is that there are all the mission members in the base, and they are watching. They are trying to communicate with the Columbia shuttle, but they can't, and they are, they are getting desperate. When they see through the screens that the shuttle is getting on fire, some of them started to cry, and the mission leader, he is not feeling well. He's crying his eyes out, and yeah, a lot of desperation and frustration, I guess. All the people from the shuttle died, and yeah, it was bad.
That would be so hard.
Yeah, to see the people that you were working with.
Yeah. They were saying they were like 12 minutes away from landing.
Yeah, that's
like you make this huge 16-day flight, and then 12 minutes to the end, they're gone.
Yeah, very hard. Very hard for their families too.
Yeah.
Okay, we are in the conclusion part. So what are the key concepts that we can see in this study case? Well, one is, you already said, that is communication. Anything else that you guys think is a key concept?
Just addressing problems when they come.
Yeah, don't avoid. I think I'd read I was rereading some of the things that I read before, and I think one of the things they bring up is that one of the guys who did find out the problem about the foam hitting the wing and actually about it, he requested something and his email just went unanswered. So you can't do that. You can't avoid problems. You need to address them right away.
Yeah, that's right. So another point here is the organization. So we didn't have a good organization with the other groups. So they have to be more organized, I guess. Okay. Any other comments?
Nope.
Should be good.
Okay. You know what happened with Alex?
No
Yeah,
idea.
He said he had a.
He said he had another group.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Okay, guys, that is the end of the study case. Thank you so much for your comments and your participation. Sorry for my English.
Hoy está bien.
Trying to. Thank you. Trying to.